In 2004, Strodes College recognised the 300th anniversary of its foundation with a series of celebratory events. Founders' Day, however, saw a commemoration of a more sombre nature in the unveiling of a living willow sculpture in the Sixth Form College's Memorial Garden. The sculpture was commissioned in recognition of the tragic events of November 1940. During the Second World War, Strodes College, then a grammar school for boys, was a significant player in the evacuation of vulnerable children from the city.
"65 years ago, when war threatened Britain, our parents were given a stark choice: keep the children at home and risk their death by bombing and gassing, or send them away from danger to live with strangers in the countryside. Codenamed Operation Pied Piper, the mass evacuation that followed has since been likened to a biblical exodus."
Operation Pied Piper evacuated 1.5 million children to the country, some as young as 5.
Quite exciting, really. We had a rather extraordinary situation because we were on a train coming from Earl's Court, which stopped in Addlestone. There were 2 schools in the train, an infant school and a grammar school. And the grammar school boys immediately got onto the platform and stretched their legs, whereas the youngsters all stayed in behind. And somebody thought, well, we were supposed to be going over to Reading, and the youngsters refused to come over here, and it went the other way. The youngsters all went up to Reading.
During the evacuation, Strodes College shared its facilities with Sloane Grammar School and Rains Foundation School.
The teaching, the facilities were first class. After having been in Brighton in a junior school, squeezed in with another small school, is first class. So we were all in the same boat, away from our parents, and we needed friends as a sort of, I can't think of the word.
Rains had originally been evacuated from Stepney to Brighton. Following the military retreat at Dunkirk, the authorities believed that a German invasion of the south coast was imminent, and a second evacuation began. About 100 second and third form pupils from Rains were dispersed to Egham, where space was found for them within Strodes School. Kenneth Carter and another Rains pupil, George Button from Hornchurch in Essex, were billeted with Mr. and Mrs. Arkle on Egham High Street. The Arkles also had 2 children of their own, Barbara, aged 15, and Tony, a boy of 13.
A savage attack was made on a home county town of Historic Associations late Friday night when about a dozen high explosive bombs were scattered in a comparatively small compass in the centre of town.
Well, the night before, it had been a very bad bombing night. We were all in bed, and when the air raid started, we were taken downstairs and we all went under the kitchen table. What I remember mostly about that night, although I was in the Blitz in London, I was home during the time, was they were using whistling bombs, and that was absolutely frightening.
About 20 casualties were caused, 3 being fatal. The bomb, which caused the most damage, fell in the main street in front of Mr. C. Arkle's draper's shop. The explosion caused the front of the premises to collapse and to fall into the cellar where the family was sleeping.
Kenneth Carter, George Button, and Barbara Arkle were all sheltering in the front part of the cellar when the blast happened. All 3 were killed. George Button's body was returned to Essex, where he was buried by his family, and Barbara Arkle was buried in Englefield Green Cemetery. Kenneth Carter was laid to rest in the same cemetery in Egham, where his grave remained unmarked for 64 years. Jean Slattery, who was 7 when the bombs fell, was similarly billeted in the town. She became a principal member of the Evacuees Reunion Association. Jean brought together representatives of Strodes College, Rains Foundation School, the Old Strodians Association and the Old Raineans Association to raise funds to acquire a headstone.
Mrs. Slattery, who was responsible for all this, rang me up and told me what the situation was. They were looking for someone to produce or come up with a memorial suitable for this. And granite was muted, but at that time, around about the 50s, granite was used a lot. So I went to one of my suppliers, and I saw a lump of stone which jumped out and said, "I'm what you want." And I couldn't refuse it. So I bought it, put it back to the workshop, made a sketch of it, and sent it to Mrs. Slattery, and she loved it. They all came to the workshop and saw it before I even started doing any carving on it. And that was that. So I was really delighted with it. And it represents a broken life. And it was suitable for the area. It looks as though it's been there for 60 years, doesn't it? And it'll be there for another 160 or 1,060.
A plaque has been placed on the wall of the supermarket that now stands on the spot where the bomb fell. East End and Chelsea evacuees returned to Egham on Thursday the 6th of May to remember the events. The headstone was dedicated and the site officially designated a civilian war grave. The original story of the Pied Piper saw only one child return to the city of Hamlin. Thankfully, Operation Pied Piper brought back many more. Tragically, Kenneth Carter was not in their number.
History centres its spotlight on bold deeds. Let it also reflect the everyday courage of ordinary people, the hard-working teachers who accompanied us, the local people who welcomed us into their homes and made us part of their lives. They were indeed a special generation.